What's up, Venka?
Hello, Venkers!
How is everybody doing?
How are you doing? 3 days up, 3 days down. Testing, baby. Testing! It's done. It's done. These cars have been on track, dude.
Yeah, they've definitely done laps at speeds that may or may not mean something.
That's right. And, but we're here today because obviously we don't understand what any of this shit means. I saw on a YouTube video that Lando Norris, when doing a full race run, was 31 seconds ahead of everyone else. So I am convinced that Lando Norris is going to win the championship. But we have someone on the show today who is hopefully going to tell me that I'm right, but probably tell me that I'm wrong. We're going to be covering all things testing today, which is why we have a journalist, broadcaster, podcaster, and Strava enthusiast, the one and only Chris Medland on the pod.
Who's been on my Strava? I'm really sorry. Is it because I share it on Instagram?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I saw you. Well, you did laps around the track, and I looked at that pace. You're running below 7-minute mile. You're running like 6:45 miles.
I think on that run I was, yeah. So I'm training for the London Marathon, so I have to go and run. And
Right.
Tracks are actually really good for it because they're closed. They're not. That one's not that flat, Bahrain, but most of them are pretty flat. You don't have to worry about someone pulling out of a side road and hitting you, or another pedestrian trying to cross and pressing the button at the wrong time. So it's actually good for running fast.
Best and worst tracks to run.
Yeah. Okay, but and then we're gonna get to what we're all here for, which is the testing of the cars. But yeah, what's the best track? What's the worst track?
Tough. Worst track, weirdly, Austria, because uphill,
Big hill.
turn 1 and turn 3 are brutal. Turn 3 is literally like climbing stairs. It's just horrible. But once you get there, it's all downhill. That bit's good. But you are dying when you get to the top of that. So that's painful. The view's the only thing that's good about that, and it's short. Spa is probably the best track, but some people will call it the worst. Same reason.
Right.
Like you've got
Eau
Eau Rouge is really steep, but other bits are really nicely steep downhill, and it's stunning when you do get views. So you get about halfway round, and you can see, one, how far away from the paddock you are and how much you've still got to run, which is horrible. But you can see so far in the forest. It's beautiful. So, I'd probably go with those two. But they're all still cool to do. Just to say you get to go on a racetrack.
Yeah,
I can say I've done laps of every F1 circuit. So if I'm talking to someone in the bar and trying to lie basically about what I'm talking about, I can say, yeah, I've done laps of every track. Don't need to say I was running.
Love it. Okay, let's get to the car. You're obviously fast on track, but these cars are a little bit faster. So, can you? I'm seeing a lot of stuff. I'm seeing people interpreting stuff. Williams had a great day. McLaren's looking strong. Ferrari brought a bunch of new designs to the car. Red Bull seems to have kept with a lot of their designs. Can you kind of give us a little bit of, I guess, like your first impressions snapshot of this testing? What are your biggest takeaways?
That it is still very close. And I was not certain that was going to be the case when we went to testing, because everyone was saying it was definitely going to be. Like all the teams, like it's going to be a classic season. The way last year ended, we're going to have 4 teams, maybe more, winning races again. It's going to be amazing. And I felt like if you built it up like that, the only way was down. The only thing that could really burst that bubble was someone would come out and be fastest by a long way. So I was like, we can't have that. And that's not been the case. It has been really hard to read based on how cold it's been. It's silly cold. Like I might as well just stayed in the UK. Like it genuinely, I've got 2 jackets with me, and this is the Middle East. It's going to be roasting. So the teams genuinely don't think anything or most of what they did, certainly with tyres, was representative. So you can kind of see a bit of a pecking order for if we raced in the cold in Bahrain, but that won't happen because even coming back here, it's like over a month away. It'll be way warmer. So I think, what was good is that it's not like McLaren or Red Bull or anyone was miles up the road. I know you said 30 seconds from the YouTube video. I think there was an advantage over the race distance, but even that, I don't think either Mercedes or Ferrari were particularly happy with some of the stuff that they had going on. I think they've had some good signs, but some messy bits as well. I don't think any team has left going like, brilliant, nailed it. And no one's also left and gone, this is a disaster, at the front at least. So I think it's looking like everything we saw at the end of last season, you're going to get something kind of similar for this year as well.
Okay. I know that there's this this flexi wing, this flexi rule that come Spain is going to go away. And that there's a kind of, there might be a change of the guard. You might be strong in the first half of the season, but then if you don't have that, if you're relying on the flexi, front wing, rear wing in order to kind of get that speed, then Spain might be a problem. Are there teams that are kind of leaning more heavily into that, teams that are avoiding it, or has everyone kind of ultimately adapted? I know, last year Red Bull was kind of not doing it. Mercedes was, McLaren obviously was. Is every team now kind of using the flexi wings with a plan that in Spain they've got that figured out then?
So I think everyone will have a solution from Spain onwards. But like you say, what's quite interesting is that Red Bull were very anti-flexi wings and pushing the FIA last year to basically outlaw them or make changes, make stronger tests, whatever it was that they were going to want. And essentially got the message that, no, we're happy with where it's at. We might beef things up a bit, but it wasn't clear about any bans coming or anything like that. Now, over the winter, then that changed. But the Red Bull on the first day, heading into turn one, you can see massive flexing of the front wing. And I wonder if they actually put in a load of effort over the winter to understand what everyone else is doing and do it themselves. And as soon as they've done it, now they're finding out, no, we're going to ban it. So it might be Red Bull that are actually hurt most, having been the ones that wanted it removed in the first place. So I think everyone does it to a certain degree. I think once it's removed, you're only rowing back to technology that everyone had before or has available. So yes, it might impact things slightly, but I don't know if it would be the whole thing, because what they at least have with it being Spain is they have visibility that's coming. So they'll have done tests this week, I'm sure, where maybe if they had a stiffer wing, how did that interact with the car? Teams are very good at working those things out, but it's a strange one because we've had a winter where it became a topic, people then talk about it, and then we saw, the Red Bull is what stood out, actually, the flexing it had on the first day. But you get a few races in, quite often people generally forget, and then they start talking about it because the rule change is coming in. But if it happens to everyone and pegs everyone back by the same sort of difference, nobody even noticed there's been a rule change. So, and I'd be amazed actually at this stage if any team was still blindly going, we've got this great flexi wing, we're using it, and we'll get to Spain and then we'll deal with the problem then. They'll all have planned ahead. So I don't actually foresee it being a huge issue, but everyone can clip that up and show me it back when it turns the whole grid order on its head.
Sure.
Right, but there was when a directive comes down or change is made, that often screws one or two teams. Last year it was something to do with Red Bull's brake balance. They wasn't there some sort of issue about that, and Red Bull kind of fell off after that a little bit, or is that just a conspiracy theory?
I think that's more a conspiracy theory. There was a theory that they had something that, from what I understand, they never had, but it was almost people looking for a reason why Red Bull suddenly not quite so competitive. But then in Austin, it was ride height changes, and there was a lot of focus on, they've got this device that lets them completely change the ride height. And by the end of that weekend, Red Bull and the FIA are there going, no, there was nothing here, there is nothing here, no big deal. Other teams are going, some more than others are going, absolutely, there's something there, and okay, you can't prove it, but we're certain they must have been using it earlier in the year and cheating. And it was just part of the politics, I think, of a title battle. Right. We'll get it again this year. It'll be great.
The FIA is beyond reproach. So if they say there's nothing there, there's certainly nothing there. And,
yeah, that's true. That is true.
Well, it's you can't trust any of these people. But speaking of trust, we're talking a lot. We're going to be trying to read the tea leaves, but I just want to give everybody some perspective here. I'm going to go to day. We just finished day 3 of testing. I'm going to let you guys in on how day 3 of testing went last year. I think this is so. Day 3 of testing, Leclerc was number 1. I think the last session, Leclerc was number 1. George Russell was number 2. Zhou Guanyu of Kick Sauber was number 3. Okay, Max Verstappen number 4, Yuki Tsunoda number 5. Stop the count. Love that.
Yeah, right where he should be.
Right where he should be. Alex Albon was 6th with 121 laps of running. People often are like, oh, they ran for a long time. That's good. They had a clean program. They had no. It's only until you get to number 7 that Oscar Piastri shows up. And I know that they kind of they were late bloomers. They were actually kind of bad in the beginning, but Logan Sargent didn't get any time in. That was perfect. And then, at the bottom, but you go to day 2, it's Carlos Sainz, number 1, Sergio Perez, in Ferrari. Sergio Perez, number 2, Lewis Hamilton, 123 laps of running. You're like, oh, Mercedes is running. It's only number 4 that you get Lando Norris at 52 laps. So it's like, does any of this fucking matter? Yuki Tsunoda in last. Impossible. Complete bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, so you're looking at fake results, clearly. Do you know what's funny, actually, I thought today was, so as you just pointed out, day 2 last year, fastest driver, Carlos Sainz, and it was the fastest time of the test. Day 2 this year, fastest driver, Carlos Sainz, it was the fastest time of the test. And he's done it for 2 different teams. And yes, he won a couple of races with Ferrari last year. So someone did go, so he's going to win 2 for Williams this year.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that a lot of the teams did say is that by having a Williams on top and actually close at the front again, but Gasly up there as well today, but in times where others were doing something similar, that in these conditions, admittedly, but there was the potential in a lot of different cars to put in a very quick lap time. And the way last year ended, qualifying in Abu Dhabi, that no one would have believed you if you'd have done that qualifying order and you were reading out the testing order from last year. That even had, Bottas in 8th, I think, in Abu Dhabi, but the gap was in Q3 was tiny.
Yeah.
But it is kind of true, like you said, look at where Joe was. And I mean, that car last year, especially at the start, in a sense as well, it doesn't matter if you put in one quick lap. If you can't do a pit stop, then you're not going to be good in a race. Right. That's why we do pay attention to the race simulations, the long stints. But also there is value on going, very lucky to be able to go and do it, but go and stand trackside and you see car behaviour. And even if someone's not doing quick laps and not on a quick run, or you think they should be doing a quick lap time and they don't put it in, but you just see how a car goes through a corner and you think it looks good, generally it is a good sign. And that's probably, again, where McLaren can probably leave pretty happy after this week.
Okay, yeah. So you're there. Obviously, you saw these cars on tracks. You were just saying, like, who looks the best? Whose Tinder profile is looking awesome? We'll see how they look on the date. But who is passing the kind of the eye test right now?
Definitely McLaren, as in, okay. I think the only time I watched that car on track and saw it at any point, this bit I was watching on a screen, was early in day 1. Piastri had a snap in the first sector, and all cars on day 1, certainly in the morning, they've just put them out there. They haven't done setup work yet. They're finding things out and then they react to it. So they all look pretty dodgy at that point. From that point onwards, it looked very good. There's turn 11 is like the left-hander where they have very short braking. It's kind of medium speed, but it's a long left-hander at the end of the back straight in Bahrain. And that seems to be very good for if you want to carry a lot of speed in there, you need confidence in the car. And there's a tailwind all week, but certainly on the first couple of days, which would really unsettle things. So if you've got a car that's really nervous and really challenging, you're probably going to be a bit more hesitant getting back on the throttle afterwards. You might run wide a few times. You might have a snap. The McLaren never, not at any stage. I think there was one time I saw Lewis go through there on the first day in the Ferrari that it looked okay, but other times the car the rear end, you could see it wanting to slide. It was not fully gripping at the rear. Now, it was still the first day. You don't worry too much. Day 2, it definitely looked much better. But then you start to see the driver starting to push the limits a bit. And he ran wide once where he just got a bit too excited on the throttle. But again, that's when you see, okay, is he getting the feedback from the car that here's where the limit is? And if you don't see as many of those kind of moments and off-track moments from drivers, it's sometimes because the car is giving them really clear direction on here's how far you can push it. So I'd say, yeah, it was the McLaren on track I was impressed with. The Red Bull I saw a little of on track. They ended up with the lowest mileage of the week. There wasn't actually as much opportunity. So for some people, they could stand trackside all day. I kind of go in and out for half an hour or so each time. And the bits I saw of it looked very solid. But it also didn't ever look like you were seeing it pushed that hard. And I think the mileage actually showed that as well. I think there was a lot of work being done and they weren't completely convinced with all the data they were getting, but that signs were good. So, the top 4 cars had moments of looking good. The Ferrari moments that didn't look great. The Mercedes was tough to read, I'll admit. And I think that's partly Kimi Antonelli's fault. I'm blaming him right now for being so entertaining. But he is an aggressive driver. He loves to throw it. He drives a lot on instinct, he says, loves to throw the car around a little bit. And at that corner, they're tiny differences, but you watch George Russell go through there and it looks like someone testing. You watch Kimi go through there and just once or twice, it looks that tiny bit more Larry, but you think it's him. That's just him just learning. He's 18. He's a young kid with a lot to learn about that car. So that kind of clouds things a little bit. The other two then that are probably more of a pertinent answer to this question was the Williams and the Alpine. Both times I watched those on track, I thought they looked very good. Now, obviously not to the naked eye, you probably can't tell the difference between that and McLaren in terms of potential. But that's when you dig into the long runs and see a little bit more of what they can actually do in raw pace. But yeah, they looked cars that looked comfortable to drive. You didn't watch them and think, oh, someone might make a mistake here, which is as the eye test goes, is about as far as you can go with it.
Bankers, this episode is brought to you by BetMGM. The season is about to start, and there are a bunch of picks that you can make. Make your 2025 season predictions. Put some money on it with BetMGM, and come see what's new at BetMGM. You can score bigger when you win with boost tokens, odd boost tokens, and more. Even if your bet doesn't hit, we've got you covered with no sweat tokens. Sign up with BetMGM today, and you'll have access to countless betting options, including new look, same-game parlays, teasers, live bets, and so much more. Take advantage of these offerings and be sure to use the bonus code DADDY when signing up to receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Baby, I'm putting my money on Lando Norris to win this championship, baby. And if you got Lewis Hamilton, whoever you think is going to win the championship, you can make that bet right now on BetMGM. Go over there and use the bonus code DADDY when signing up because they'll know that we sent you, and you can receive, again, up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 and over. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY for New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP for Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 for Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF for Indiana. 1-800-981-0023 for Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code DADDY and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. Speaking of other eye tests, seems like some of these cars have come in with more aggressive new designs. Some of them are looking more like last year's car. Do you have a sense for what I'm hearing is that like Ferrari's coming in hot. They're coming in aggressive. They've come in with a bunch of changes, that there's an effort like we want to win this year. Is there a kind of like a vibe of, with the looming 2026 change in regulations that people are putting resources into those cars? Is there a kind of are there certain teams that you can sense, oh, their eggs are in this year's basket, and versus, oh, no, all their eggs are in next year's basket? What's the kind of like divvying up of the eggs, which are very expensive these days?
I would say, actually, everyone is looking at next year. Everyone is all eggs in next year's basket at the earliest possible opportunity. But you can't write off this year for a number of reasons. I actually spoke to Eo Komatsu at Haas about this. He said, even if they were a second off the pace in testing, they can't just go, screw it, we'll leave that and focus on 26 completely, because the money they'd lose in the Constructors' Championship, which shows how close it is, really, that everyone feels like they can make progress and catch up with other teams or beat other teams. So he said it's just an impossible decision. You can't say, no, we're not focusing on this year because there's too much money at stake for all the different potential finishing positions. But at the same time, most of the more radical changes came last year and I think that's also why there was a bit of convergence at the front at one stage, but it was a 2-year cycle they saw it as. They knew last year was the last time they could go all in on one car, and they'd need to develop it as well as they could for, instead of 12 months or one season, a season and a bit to get them into this year, because then they were going to go full focus on 26 really early. So I actually was surprised at how different some of the cars were. Ferrari, they changed the approach with their front suspension, but they said that they found they kind of were running out of development opportunities or had hit the ceiling of the previous car. Clearly a good ceiling. They were really good at the end of last season, but they felt they couldn't really go much further with it, so they had to make that change. And in that sense, it's just, you can almost then, if you felt you had to make that change, you can gamble because it's for 1 year. Next year, doesn't matter what happened this year. So I think that's why we saw a few. But I think realistically, any team, and I don't see huge gaps between anyone, but any team that is disappointed with where it starts the season and maybe has a poor first quarter will absolutely then be like, everything now goes on 26, and they'll start talking that way because it's such a big opportunity.
But if McLaren and Red Bull are, past the quarter mark, at the halfway mark, and it's neck and neck, they're at each other's throats. Is that, you really see Zach Brown being like, well, we got to focus on 2026, gotta keep, or it's like when you have a position, when you're in that sort of position where you can win, are you just like, fuck it?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because if McLaren hadn't won the Constructors' Championship last season, I think they go, fuck it. I think they're all in, let's get this title when we can get it. Red Bull, the way they approached 2021, it was finally the year after all that Mercedes dominance that they could take the fight to Mercedes. They were not going to let up. And that forced both teams to develop all the way to the end. But actually, maybe there was some of Red Bull's own thinking that they felt very confident in what they were going to do in 2022. With 26, I think if I had to put money on it right now, I wouldn't expect Red Bull to be at the front because of the engine regulation changes and the fact they're building their own engine. That's a huge ask. I'm not saying, it's not that they'll do badly. What I think would be a brilliant achievement for that team would just to be, semi-competitive, able to get the odd podium with their own engine. They've never done that before. It's a huge undertaking. So they might be more tempted, if they're in this mix this year, to push harder than they did, dare I say it, almost towards the end of last year, if it looked like it was drifting at any point. Whereas for McLaren, I think it's a tougher call because there's a feeling that the Mercedes is likely going to be one of the stronger power units next year, if not the strongest. And McLaren have proven that they can win championships as a customer of Mercedes. So they might have won last year, miss out in a close fight with Red Bull because they turn off the taps a bit earlier this year, but then they've got a chance of winning 3 or 4 in a row like Red Bull did. So that's what they're all weighing up. And I feel like McLaren are probably actually now more likely to not stay 100% all in, but we're still going to be talking about 95% all in or whatever. They're not going to just give up. They still want to win. Right. And they'll just maybe make a slightly less short-term decision on a few occasions if it comes to it. Whereas Red Bull, I think, would go all in.
What do you think? What are you making of from what I can tell? Doesn't seem like, at least on the surface, that Red Bull has really upgraded the car a ton. It looks very similar to last year's Red Bull car, and they got towards the bottom of time on track in testing. How kind of competitive do you see Red Bull being this season? Do you think they'll be right there?
I think they'll be right there. I think It's weird. You look at the car between what they ran in testing last year and ran this year, and it is very different. If you remember last year, it had towards the rear wing from the engine cover, it had those shoulders.
Yeah, the Grace Jones shoulder pads.
It was pretty ugly. But those have gone, and on most teams they've gone. And I think that actually happened through the year last year for them. But wherever their problems were, with a lot of these cars, they're very sensitive, but the floor is the big part, and we don't get to stare at the floor. So for all we know, the floor is immensely different. I was actually told by a German colleague today who'd spoken to Helmut Marko that they were testing a floor or changing parts of 2 floors today during Max's testing, and Helmut Marko apparently was very happy with the way things went. And this is the bit where it is tough to read, and it's very hard for me to sit here credibly as a journalist and be like hedging your bets. But when you don't see a race sim from a team like Red Bull, and they've been doing this sort of work, it could be problems. They had other issues they wanted to resolve. They didn't get time to do a race sim. They had reliability issues, whatever it was. And it was a bit of a disjointed week. But it can also be that they're pretty confident in their pace and there's other things they want to focus on. And they don't think it's so important to know how the car performs over a whole race distance. They want to dial in other bits. So it's kind of, there's two schools of thought, and they're kind of polar opposites. It's not the middle. Whereas I'd flip around and say with McLaren and what we've seen, you feel 95% confident that they're okay with where they're at, and you're seeing that they are a front running, like one of the race winning potential teams in Melbourne. I put Red Bull in that mix from so far. I think the weird thing as well is short-term memories. They ended last year, or the second half of last year was bad, but Max still won 2 of the last 4 races. He still won the title. And look at how they dominated the start of the year and the seasons before. Like, it's not going to take a huge amount of work to get them back into that kind of position, or at least a position to be winning. They're fighting for wins every week. So I would have them very much in that fight.
Okay. It's interesting. What I've been reading is that Red Bull has sort of maybe lowered the ceiling on their performance, but maybe widened the window in which the car is good. And they've sort of tried to build a more conservative car and, more drivable car because it was peaky. Whereas McLaren has taken a big swing apparently with this new wishbone and dive, whatever the fuck. And people were shocked at how different McLaren is looking. And McLaren's taken a big swing, to try to push it forward. And Red Bull is trying to sort of optimize what they already have. And I'm wondering what your assessments are in terms of, I don't know. I guess the Red Bull one is more conservative and the other one is more risky, and there is a chance that the McLaren can storm the field and just be so on because they took such a big swing, or they could be unreliable. I'm wondering where like Red Bull could be the new Ferrari, right? That they're always around, but they're never great.
So I wouldn't expect anyone to be unreliable, really. I know. In the sense, if you mean in the sense of track to track, sometimes they're competitive, sometimes they're not. Then then maybe a little. But I think we still saw that even with McLaren last year. At times, there were race weekends where they weren't quite in the mix for the victory. And I'm trying to go off the top of my head with that. But so Austin, Ferrari were comfortably quicker, and Lando maybe should have beaten Max, but made that hard. And if you think of what we were expecting and seeing of those two teams and cars, look what Max over a race distance could hold Lando off. The McLaren didn't have a big advantage there. It was on average the best car, but it was very rare that it had a huge advantage over everyone. Even Singapore, when Lando won by miles, the Ferrari was pretty quick, but they, Carlos crashed in qualifying and Leclerc messed up 2 quali laps and started out of position. Once he got into clear air, he showed a bit of pace. Now, Lando still would have won that race, but Leclerc should have been second, I think, in it. So I don't think we saw anyone miles ahead. But I think with it, in some ways, it makes total sense because the way that Red Bull got it wrong last year, or had trouble, was with the car, as you say, being too peaky, and they needed to flatten that curve. But prior to that, they had an advantage, a clear advantage on the field. So they can afford that advantage to maybe, if we average it out, to drop slightly. As long as they can tap into it more often, they will be winning more races or competitive more often. McLaren, on the flip side, still had some times where they weren't quite there in the mix. And they also showed, though, that every time they did something to their car and updated it, it improved. They were the only team, I think, that could say that they never had an upgrade they introduced to their car that stumped them or held them up. Ferrari had it mid-season, Barcelona won, obviously Red Bull, as we're talking about, Mercedes all over the place, sometimes great, sometimes rubbish. So for McLaren, I think they've got full faith in all of their simulation tools and development tools. So a big swing as such is probably not as big a risk to a McLaren as it would be to Mercedes or Ferrari. So I think that's why for each team that is an approach that makes total sense. And I think again that's why it still looks right now like not a huge amount has changed, because they've kind of both addressed the weaknesses they had to address, and it leaves them kind of status quo.
This episode is brought to you by Southern Comfort. With a one-of-a-kind blend of fruit and spices, SoCo whiskey is the original ready-for-anything spirit. Satisfying on its own and ideal in any mixed drink, Southern Comfort is easy to enjoy however you drink it and whoever you drink it with. We think SoCo can go with everything, but you be the judge. Find your comfort zone and try out a cocktail today. Some opinions, what you can try. These are the ones that I personally enjoy. SoCo with lemonade. Ooh, get that little bit of sour with the sweet and a little bit of that punch. Delicious. SoCo with orange juice if you want full sweetness hitting your gullet, or of course, classic Coca-Cola. Mix it with your Coca-Cola or your Pepsi, or keep it Pepsi Zero or Coke Zero to keep it tight, dude. Okay, no matter what the moment, Southern Comfort is ready for anything packed with flavor, mixes with anything, and easy to drink. We challenge all of you out here to find your comfort zone. Try out some Southern Comfort mixed drinks and send us your favorites. We'll shout out the best ones on a future pod. Pick up some Southern Comfort today, Venkas. This episode is brought to you by Everyman Jack. Listen, when I go out into these streets of New York City, I want to be feeling and smelling my best. All of a sudden, people will sometimes, rarely recognize me. And the last thing that I want is they say, look, I met the guy from the Red Flags, and guess what? He smells like crap. But with Everyman Jack, I don't have to worry about that. Everyman Jack is the clean men's care brand made specifically for guys. And I listen when I say clean, because Everyman Jack has naturally derived ingredients. So many of these things out there, you don't know. You read it, you go, what the hell is even that? Like the meme. But with Everyman Jack, it's all naturally derived ingredients, from body wash to deodorant, hair to beard care. They've got everything you need to look, smell, and feel great without breaking the bank. This stuff is affordable. And here's why they stand out. Every product is made naturally derived ingredients. So I said earlier, no harsh chemicals. You're not putting any junk on your body. Most guys don't realize what's in their body wash or deodorant. Everyman Jack makes it easy to clean up your routine. Also, it smells great. The scents are designed for guys. Think manly and outdoorsy, sandalwood, cedar, coconut, vanilla. My personal fave, because I like a little bit of sweetness on my smell. And even new ones like Mountain Air, so that I can pretend to be outdoorsy even though I live in New York City and actually have never seen a tree. The best part, it's affordable, so you don't need to drop $15 on a body wash. You can get everything for under $10 with Everyman Jack. This is the first men's personal care brand you don't have to compromise on price, scent, or quality. Give Everyman Jack a shot today and head to Walmart, Target, or Amazon to pick up your next body wash and stick of deodorant. Try Everyman Jack today at www.everymanjack.com. How is as I'm looking at this the year, it's the big four, but Mercedes feels like it's kind of the ugly stepchild of the family of that big four.
Maybe not now.
Do you see them kind of like getting back into, top student status over there?
I don't have, they've given no faith over this generation of car that they will go, like you say, top student, top of the class. I think it's, to use that analogy, it'll be like if the right questions are on the exam, they're going to ace it. But, they might not have done all of the...
is cranked all the way up.
Well, it seems like this, because they did well in cold weather races last year, it seems like this would have been a time for them to excel. And I think they were pretty good. They were at the top of the timesheets at one.
Well, George was quickest today, last day. He was fastest, but it was still slower than what Carlos did yesterday. And today was actually probably the best, warmest day. We had a bit of sun. Okay. It wasn't huge, but it meant that it's probably in Fahrenheit like 5 or 6 degrees hotter than yesterday. But that made a big difference on track temperature for a spell with the sun out. But Toto Wolff made a joke about this yesterday that the team should have been 2 seconds a lap quicker than everyone in those conditions based on last year, and they're not. Right. So either they've resolved that problem and made the car more competitive or more stable across all conditions, or they've just lost their USP and they now have no strengths. And he's like, we don't know yet because we haven't gone somewhere hot.
They sound so hopeless. That's like not what I want to hear. It's like, we could be evened it out, or we could just suck even worse than last year. That's not the kind of thing I want to hear. Speaking of sucking, we got these top four. Like, who are we confident? Like, oh God, these guys suck. I mean, Haas seems like they're bad, but they were really bad at testing last year, it felt like. And I was ready to stick the fork in them. Sauber seems shit too.
Who's the ugliest kid at the prom this year?
Steak.
Okay.
Yeah. For multiple reasons, to be honest. Yeah. They were already struggling last year. That was not a good car that they started the year with. They improved it later on, but it's going to be Audi next year. There's a lot changing. There's a lot of focus on where that team's going and how they're going to everything's going to settle down with the money they're investing and the changes they're making. But also, there wasn't enough money coming in at the right time to basically create a good car for right now. So why would you then, for very short-term gain, we're talking about it, the 26 switch. Well, Audi don't want steak Sauber to be great right now. They want Audi to be great from next year. And it's not that they want the team to do badly, but it just makes no sense to put the money in. So I think all the focus is on that. There's a lot of work that needs doing. Both there and Aston Martin are two teams where it kind of has to be better next year. Aston in a different way. For Steak and Audi, it just needs to improve. But for Aston, it needs to be front runners, really. And based on that, I think that's why I just wouldn't expect Steak to actually go after it as hard as anyone else. Haas have definitely just been doing their own thing. Same as last year. It worked for them. They learned a lot. They genuinely were like, we're not running anything that's remotely competitive on the first 2 days. We're just doing high fuel. And Esteban Ocon actually admitted, he's like, it's different. Not done this before, but he agreed with it. Like, he was like, it worked for them last year. Like, they've told me the logic. I'm happy with it. Because obviously for a driver, especially in a new car, you then don't really push its limits in low fuel and get to know where those final half a tenth or tenth of a second are. And you need them in current F1. Certainly for midfield teams, it's so tight. So he was like, he never said there were downsides, but there are downsides in that sense. But they were just making sure they had a full understanding of that car and race trim, because that's the most important thing of what they need. Yeah. And it worked last year. So I would not have them at the bottom of the pile. I'd have Steak.
Last year, Kevin Magnussen was 16th. In the final testing classification. So, there you go. It all goes back to one chart.
Okay, but how much are you buying? What are you seeing as the seal? Because, Williams, obviously, Sainz was on the top of the field there. Then people were like, this Williams car, like, oh my God. You said it earlier, Sainz is going to win multiple races. Like, how high do you feel like maybe this Williams, and maybe it seems like maybe the Alpine as well, do you think that there are podiums lying ahead for those teams this year? Is it possible that there'll be a Williams on a podium?
Yeah. It's why I just took my glasses off, so then I can say this was manipulated if I was wrong, and I'll be like, look, see, I had glasses on earlier in the pod. Genuinely, I'm not shitting you when I say this. I made, not a bet, but I said to Carlos Sainz's manager today, I reckon he is going to pick up a trophy at some point this year. And I said, I think just one. And I counted sprint trophies. Other people then had a go at me, and they're like, "They only get a medal or a plaque. It's not a trophy." Yeah, I was like, "Come on."
So in this scenario, you were Carlos Oniero, Carlos's cousin, was betting against Carlos, saying, "No, definitely not."
No, he was just like, "Wow, you think so?" type thing. He's like, that would be something that'd be amazing. We'd sign up for that right now, type thing. And I'll remind you of that. But he wasn't totally against it either. And it's not that the Williams is that good, but I think Williams got it so wrong last year at the start of the season. That car was late. It was overweight. They didn't have the spares. They obviously only had one car in Melbourne. And Alex Albon was adamant that if that car had been at the right weight that it should have been, they got it there later in the season. But because you can just guarantee lap time by taking weight off a car, it was like if we had the weight right at the start of the season, we'd have been getting some good results. That car was handy. Others then caught up and they couldn't develop it very well because all they were doing was trying to get weight off it. But he was like, we'd have had some big points. And I think they've kind of moved more towards that. I think the way the midfield is, they could be fifth team at certain tracks, maybe sixth at others. And over 24 races with 4 competitive teams at the front again, and a more intense title fight, I would say, than last year, in the way that I don't think one driver runs away early on, then something I thought it was strange last year that something didn't happen that was a bit more crazy to open up podiums for people apart from Brazil. The fact that was the only time any team outside the top 4 got a podium in such a close field was remarkable, really. So I just think there might be something somewhere, or the right racetrack that suits the car, and it's a sprint weekend and they just get the setup right on Friday and it'll put you right up there. Look, where did Hulkenberg qualify in? Was it 4th, I think, in Abu Dhabi? At the end of the season. He got a penalty that dropped him back, I know. But again, going back to how close that qualifying session was, these drivers, Williams, 2 quality drivers as well. Carlos puts in a good qualifying lap somewhere on a sprint weekend, and why not hold on for that position or pick up a place or 2? So, I said I could see it. And now I was keeping that private so that I wouldn't look so stupid, but now it's out there.
Well, we'll see. I might have to change my tune on Mr. James Vowles because I've been skeptical of him. But if they can bring that thing to a podium this year, then maybe he actually was the genius all along. Okay, wait. So there we know that you have to go. You have a flight to catch, but I want to cover a couple other things. These top teams, we got 3 new drivers in these top teams. We got, obviously, Kimi Antonelli at Mercedes. You've got Liam Lawson now at Red Bull. And, of course, the man of the moment, Lewis at Ferrari. What are your impressions for how they are getting on in the new machinery?
So, for Lewis, I think it's the hardest task because of the expectation on him. And speaking to him, he's talked about the respect he now has for drivers that move teams. He finds there's so much work to do to get comfortable again. He's had 12 years at Mercedes, only ever driven a Mercedes power unit. He knew every switch and every mode and everything like the back of his hand. And now he's got to learn that all over again in a brand new setting, in a totally new language as well. And again, actually talking to Carlos's manager, he was saying how, when Charles will come into the garage, even during testing, but certainly in the first couple of race weekends, when he wants the car to react a slightly different way, he'll know exactly the change to ask for and how to ask for it, how Ferrari go about that. He says, Lewis, it will take ages to get there. That's natural. So he's up against Charles Leclerc in a position that Charles Leclerc is very comfortable in, with expectations that he should be performing like everyone knows Lewis Hamilton can. I think that he's looked more comfortable than he has in many pre-seasons in this era of car. I think, if anything, this looks like a car that suits him maybe more than any of the Mercedes did. But I still think he's never really got on with this era of car. He's not a huge fan of it. So I don't think I would say that he's looking better than Charles, for example. I think there's still a lot of development, in a sense, or improvement to come from Lewis when he gets in there. I've been actually impressed with Antonelli. One, it was great hearing the team just talk about what a fresh start it is. They are sad Lewis left. They wouldn't have chosen to lose Lewis. But by having someone new come in, young, so enthusiastic, energized, excited, up for everything, on every aspect of what the team wants to do, then it's kind of created an ability for them to change their approach as a team and their outlook. They don't have to say no to so much stuff, because understandably, Lewis had reached the point over years of contracts and stuff that he could really hone his own demands within the team. Kimi's just come in and been like, you tell me what I have to do. I'm 18 and, thanks for the chance. And George, the same, is actually more open at his point in his career. So the atmosphere is different there. They're kind of refreshed. And Kimi didn't make many mistakes at all. I was expecting a few more. Like I said, you can tell he's a little bit aggressive with the way he drives sometimes. I thought that would lead to maybe a couple of spins or some big lockups and off-track moments, whatever. And I think he maybe ironed all that out in TPC testing last year. He really got to make his mistakes behind closed doors. So I thought that was a really nice controlled start for an 18-year-old. And then for Liam, it's harder to read because the Red Bull wasn't so consistently running. Like we said, lowest mileage. You just didn't get to see a race stint to see if he was comfortable and consistent. He didn't get that chance. He lost out on running yesterday with an engine water pressure problem. But I actually interviewed him today and he was very happy with how the car feels. He just says he can't wait to go racing. And I think what's good for him is the pressure's off. Like Red Bull have said, Max is number 1, Liam's number 2 this year. That's how we're doing it. And that must kind of suck to hear in one sense, but also then you don't have to overextend yourself trying to match and beat Max Verstappen, at least not early on. And I think it has helped him settle in quite calmly. He had one spin on the first day, I think, but that can happen. So, yeah, I'd probably say that Antonelli and Lawson look maybe they're slightly better prepared, and don't forget they were in those families previously. And Lewis looks like he's happier than maybe I thought he even would be at this stage, more comfortable, but still has work to do as well.
Who are you worried about of that crop?
Of that crop, as in rookies or the front runners?
Rookies, new drivers. You could throw Alex Albon in there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on his new situation with Carlos Sainz. And we've got Hadjar, we got Bortoletto, we've got Berriman. We still got anybody giving you concerns, including Alex Albon?
So I think the answer you're looking for from me is no. I'd say no one.
No.
He's quaking.
No
in his
one
boots.
driver is giving me concerns actually for what they're doing yet. It's early, and like I say, we've only seen him drive in really cold conditions with no pressure in Bahrain. But the one that I think most people will say as well is Jack Doohan, because of the looming shadow of Franco Colapinto there. And it has just put the pressure on, even though the team really downplayed it. And it's so funny because team principal Ollie Oakes today was saying, what I want most is everyone just to give him space, let him get on. I really feel for Jack, and I want people to let him get on with it and settle in. And everyone else has been saying that they really feel for Jack, but it's because he's been put in a position where Alpine have gone and, as it turns out, loaned a driver. They've taken him from Williams, but they don't own him for 2 years, where Williams expect him. Like, the only reason they've given him over is so that he will race at some point. That's their expectation. Now, it's not that they demand it, or it's not. I don't believe it's fully written in the contract that he absolutely must. But obviously, the discussions are that they expect at some point it will happen. So, if you're a rookie in there and it's your seat he would take because it's surely not going to be Pierre's unless something crazy happens with the contract Pierre has, then it's almost like Jack's going to feel like he has to do something extraordinary. He's not going to get that time and space. If he just has a very good, solid start to his career as a Formula One driver, but Pierre's having a very good solid season, there will be a gap because that's natural, but I just don't think he'll get the time. So that's who I worry for, because I actually think he could be a really good, strong F1 driver. He's elbows out when he's confident and he's fun to watch, but I worry that his confidence will be sapped early on by the situation, and then that will mean he won't perform the way he should, might overpush it, makes mistakes. It's like a vicious cycle. I am with you that it's interesting what happens at Williams, really interesting, but dare I say it, I think when you bring Alex up, I think with the teammates he's had and the situation Williams has been in, there's been times he's looked great and you can't tell, was he that good or was he just a lot better than what was next to him, and did the team only really have one decent car to run? And there's other times he's not looked so good, like when Franco came in at times, or even Logan got pretty damn close to him at certain qualifying sessions and just showed that he had raw pace to match Alex. And you go, well, is he, have we been overrating him because he's in this low pressure environment at Williams now? Having Carlos there will answer that question 100%. And I think Albon knows that and is all in on, like, the two of them making the car as good as they can, and then they can go toe to toe. It does sound like actually a really good setup. Albon's opened his arms rather than gone defensive, like, I need to beat this guy. He's gone, I want to be racing nearer the front. This guy can help me get there. But as soon as they're racing each other, it'll be elbows out. So that's a really cool dynamic, actually, because normally you see one or the other. Like, I've no worries about Bortoleto because him and Hülkenberg are at totally different points of their career in a car that's going to be nowhere, and they're getting on well, but Bortoleto is just trying to learn from Hülkenberg, and he might rattle his cage a bit, but it's going to be for 16th, 17th. Even Hülkenberg, I think, will just be able to handle that because he'll be looking longer term. Whereas, Williams, there's two drivers in kind of a similar situation, so that's going to be fun.
Because I have to tell you about this game-changing product that I use every night before a big night out. If I'm going to be drinking, I use this product. It's called pre-alcohol. Let's face it, after a night of drinks, I'm 33 now. I wake up in the morning, I feel like death. But that's until I found pre-alcohol and Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration. All my life I've been told it's dehydration. You just got to drink water. No. I can't drink water through literal toxic byproduct in my gut, baby. That's what's to blame for my rough next day, but the pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. I have used this product many times before, and let me tell you, it works. I tell my friends about it. I say, you're not going to believe this, but after this night where I drank, you know how guys like to calculate your drinks? I had 3 beers, 4 Negronis, 2 shots of tequila. I felt like death the next morning. No, not with Z-Biotics. With pre-alcohol, I can stay on track and not let winter travel and celebration like Valentine's Day coming up, the big game, or Mardi Gras throw me off my course. Go to ZBiotics/Red Flags to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Red Flags at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed by 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they will refund you your money, no questions asked. But guess what? You won't have to do that because the stuff works. Just remember to head to zbiotics.com/Red Flags and use code Red Flags at checkout for 15% off. Happy drinking. At the top, something that we've discussed just in terms of strategy, in terms of trying to win a driver's championship, that, if these teams are all close and some of these teams have good equivalent drivers, an Oscar Piastri and a Lando Norris, a Lewis and maybe a Charles if Lewis can get up to speed, but maybe not. Whereas the Red Bull, they've already established this is the pecking order. Max is going to get priority all the time. Is there a consideration? Are there questions being dodged currently about, hey, at what point are we going to put our eggs into one driver's basket if they're really the person that has the best shot at winning this championship? Like, how much of that calculation do you think is being had, or are they going to continue to just like kind of avoid questions about it?
There's definitely calculations going on. I think with McLaren, they will hope one driver does emerge over the other. And I think just based on last year, it's most likely to be Lando over Oscar. If Oscar doesn't make another step, he's still early in his career, and to find the consistency he needs, they're both trying to look for that. And I think McLaren just hope Lando will find it first, and therefore the decision will be made for them. The one that I think is, I would say, most worried about it, but is putting on a very brave face, is Fred at Ferrari. Because if you've got Lewis and Charles closely matched and they're fighting for a championship, and scrutiny on that team, but how do you say to one of those two drivers, you're backing up the other guy? Like, that would be so difficult. And he said today, actually, something similar along those lines. And he said that he really, it's a problem he's looking forward to if he gets it, and he hopes, like, he'd be excited to answer that question in Monza if I ask him then. And then he said, or even later. Part of me was like, he said Monza like 2 or 3 times in the answer, and I was like, is that in your head when you have to make a decision, end of the European season? Like, that's when we draw the line. Is it just because that's when the intensity will be the highest as a Ferrari team boss? Or is it that you were just picking a name out? I don't know. But I think for him, it's toughest. I mean, it would be a good problem for Mercedes to have, to even be in the title fight, I think, with the drivers. I think they could be winning races and stuff, but that's still a big step they've got to make against 3 teams. It's not only do they have to catch up with Ferrari and Red Bull and McLaren, but if they make that step up to that level that they were at last year, they also have to be helped by one of those 3 not going a bit further ahead. So, yeah, I can't see them being in a driver's title fight, so they'd be delighted if they were in one. Whereas, yeah, Red Bull, they've laid their stall out. McLaren's the one where they probably will need someone to emerge, and they at least have the experience of last year. They've gone through it a bit, so I think they'll handle it better. But people will be hot on how they handle it because of what happened last year.
Who do you think has got a bigger sort of Damocles hanging over their head? Who's got more pressure on them going into this year? Is it Oscar or is it Lando? Because Lando couldn't close it out last year. Oscar doesn't want to be a number 2 driver. That'll almost be that could be seen as really bad for Oscar's career if Lando wins a championship and he's backing him up. So, who do you think's got more to lose this year?
I think Lando's got more to lose. I think you're right that it will slow Oscar's momentum. We've seen him improve year on year so far, but there was still plenty of off weekends, or too many off weekends, and areas that he felt he needed to improve on from last year. And Lando had the higher highs and I'd say fewer lows, but still some fairly big ones. But Lando is more experienced. He's been in that team that whole time, and he was the one who got closest last year and should build on that experience to do better this year. So if Oscar was to kind of leapfrog ahead of him in his development, then that would be damaging, I think, really damaging for Lando. Whereas if Lando just makes another step, that will keep his stock high and be less damaging to Oscar. Because I think you could accept realistically that just where they're at in their careers, that Oscar will always be a step behind Lando. As long as they both keep improving, they can both be world champions in the future in the right machinery. But if it flipped, then I think it really hurts Lando.
All right, prediction. Do you have, if right now, constructors and drivers champion, who do you think?
McLaren constructors, Max drivers.
Okay.
But mainly for the reasons we've just chatted about.
Yeah.
I think McLaren is the one I'm most confident on being competitive again this year. That doesn't mean that it couldn't be someone else, but just the most confident. And the signs from last year. But yeah, Max having the whole Red Bull backing. And the team were aware of it. They mentioned it today. So a team member said that analysis does show that even partners get a bit more excited about a drivers' championship because the value of coverage and things like that. So even though there's financial value in the constructors, they're less less kind of prioritizing the constructors than they used to, maybe. But they still felt they should have done better last year, and they don't want to waste a chance. But yeah, they're all in on Max.
Okay, I know you got to run in a minute. There was the blackout happened. I'm curious, like if there are any, is there any of your favorite moments or stories from this whole weekend? Something that happened behind the scenes? Any chaos in the blackout? Someone kind of like being crazy? What comes to mind?
There was a lot of torches that came out, and then I was at McLaren, and the whole ownership team from Bahrain showed up for a tour of the team in the garage at that moment. So that was good and bad. The car was there for them to look at, but they had mechanics running around panicking that they had no power to plug into it. So that was quite funny. There was, I'm trying to think, driver-wise, I saw a lot of Valtteri Bottas going around and making content, and I genuinely felt a little bit sorry for him because like he's hilarious on some of the content, but at the same time, I'm like, he's also better than that. Like he should be to me, he should be racing still, but I'm excited by all the rookies that came in. I just think we don't have enough seats. So I felt a bit sorry for him. Yeah, it was bizarre, the issues we had. Then we had the smashed glass today that fell out of the starter's box. Then we had the bus going across the runoff area at turn 10 to cause another red flag. Crazy things happening everywhere. That was all quite entertaining. But aside from that, dare I say it, it was quite boring because there's no huge dramas anymore. There was no one team where their car wouldn't run or someone who was 10 seconds off the pace or 10 seconds quicker than everyone else. It's just everyone's got so good. It will be good for racing, but it means that they just kind of get on with it and they don't stress, which stress is fun. That gives us something to talk about.
Well, hopefully this is the calm before the beautiful, beautiful storm. All right, we know you got to catch a flight. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. Where can people find you? Where if they want more Chris Medland this season, where should they go?
Well, I mean, right now, like in an hour, Bahrain Airport. So if you're in the vicinity, and this is uploaded that quickly. But yeah, I'm on Twitter /X all the time, live tweeting races normally. So that's Chris Medland F1 on there. But writing wise, I'm on racer.com in the US. And I'm on Motorsport Magazine, that's UK based. I do a bit for F1.com. And on radio, SiriusXM and Speed City Broadcasting, we do the live radio coverage of Formula One in the US. So if you want to hear like a grid walk that's not Martin Brundle, therefore not quite as good, you can get me running around. But at least it's bespoke to the US. So, give it a shot sometime.
Right. Come on. All right. Can you honor us? We start this pod with a What's Up Vankas in honor of our friend and colleague Gunter Steiner. Will you honor us with a goodbye Vankas?
Who?
Whoa!
Goodbye, Vanka.
Whoa! Beautiful. Goodbye, Vankas.
Goodbye, Vankas.